Hello and welcome to today's session, Introduction to ADM Reports. My name is Monica Paz from the School Finance Operations Support Team. I'm an account analyst lead, and we'll be going over AzEDS ADM reports and student count reports. In today's agenda, I'll go over a brief introduction of school finance, some definitions that will be regarding words that we'll be talking about throughout the presentation, context and resources, reviewing the AzEDS data process, ADM reports, and school finance deadlines. The school finance unit is broken up into different divisions or different teams. You have your SF account analyst, which is the team that you will be interacting with if you have questions regarding student data, your SDER report or school district employee report, instructional calendars, transportation reporting for districts, or if you have a 915 that you need to process. If you have questions regarding your payment, the team that you want to talk to is the SF payments team. Or if you have questions regarding your budget, we have the budgets team. Each one of the groups within school finance has a shared inbox. So if you needed to contact anybody in the school finance team, you would reach out to any one of the emails listed within school finance. If you have questions on how to access school finance, specifically for student data, you'll want to send an email to the SF analyst team at azed.gov. You can also stay up to date with school finance memos by reaching our hot topics. You can actually read the hot topics on the school finance homepage. You can subscribe to updates, utilize our knowledge center, join us every other Friday for School Finance Fridays, or visit us for some of our upcoming trainings. The Hot Topics is posted on the School Finance homepage. If you go to www.az.gov/finance, it'll take you to the School Finance homepage. On that page, you'll see on the left-hand side most recent Hot Topics. To the right of that, you'll see previous Hot Topics, and it's broken up by the individual teams, either for budgets, data, which are the account analyst, or payments Hot Topics. Once you click on there, you'll see the next screen shows a little red guide that says subscribe for updates. You'll then be prompted to sign up for which category you'd like to receive updates for, either through each one of the divisions or all of the hot topics, and you can determine how frequently you want to receive those emails. Before we get started, I'd like to define some of the words that we talk about throughout this presentation. If you're new to school finance, sometimes it can be a little bit scary when we start talking about ADM, or we speak in acronyms, and FTE and 915, and what are all those things. So before I get started, I'd like to talk about the top two. Average daily membership, also referred to as ADM, or FTE, full-time enrollment. ADM is simply the determination that we use to pay your LEA or local education agency or your school for the student memberships for the students that are enrolled within your school. We'll talk about ADM a little bit later, and we'll get to go through some of the ADM reports and what you should be looking for on those reports. Full-time enrollment is the membership schedule that the schedule that the student has with you. Those can be in increments of 1, 0.75, 0.50, 0.25, or 0. Depending on the student's schedules. There are guidelines for FTE that are posted under the Knowledge Center on what a student's FTE value should be. A fundable student, as determined by legislation, is a student who has a membership within your district within the first 100 days of your instructional calendar. An eligible student is also a student that has been reported from you, the LEA, as a tuition payer code 1, has a full-time enrollment value of greater than 0. Again, those are in quarter increments, 0.25, 0.50, 0.75, or 1. And that the student meets the age requirements defined in statute. That they're 5 before the kinder, 6 for first grade, and up to 22. We also use not just ADM to pay districts or charters. We also use other sources of data that is received to the school finance department. We use the data that is sent to AzEDS. We use staff data for districts. which is the school district employee report, and we also use transportation information for districts. If you have questions regarding these payments, you can either reach out to the school finance analyst team, and if they're more specific questions, the payments team will be the best source for questions regarding the payment for these. The AzEDS process. So before we dive into ADM, I think that it's best that we understand what the AzEDS process is and understand what happens to your data once it gets submitted from your student information system to the state. Understanding kind of the flow and understanding what happens to that data and its life cycle from you entering a student and their birthday and demographic information, attendance information, and everything tied to a student to the time that it actually turns into a dollar amount. So we'll go over the AzEDS process so that we can begin to understand how data flows through the system. So here is a diagram of the process in AzEDS, and if you've been to any one of the workshop Wednesdays or if you've attended any of the school finance Fridays, you've probably seen this diagram before. I think that this best illustrates how the AzEDS process works. So the little blue guy is you at the school, and the computer is your student information system, or SIS, that you have contracted with. That's where you enter student information such as birthday, demographic information, all the good stuff that has to do with the student. The frequency of which your SIS is communicating with AzEDS is determined by you, the LEA. It's a configuration within your SIS to determine how often it's going to send transactions. It can be sent automatically, it could be sent every hour, it could be sent once a week. At minimum, it needs to be sent every 20 days. How you determine and what you set up in your SIS is up to you. And it communicates from your SIS to AzEDS through what's called an API. API is Application Program Interface, and that normally is open 24/7. If it's not available, then you should receive what's called a red flag. In the IT world, you have to go through the AzEDS IT team's website to sign up for the red flags if it's not available for whatever reason for maintenance. For the most part, it's available 27 for your SIS to receive transactions through the API or Application Program Interface. Once the data lands, it goes through a validation or verification process. And then once the data lands and it goes through verification, we go through a process called integrity. I'll explain a little bit about integrity later. And then it also goes through ACE. So as the data goes through AzEDS, it's processed. Integrity runs every single night at 5 o'clock, and as soon as integrity is done completing or processing for the entire state, it takes about an hour or two for all data to run through what we call the integrity process. ACE picks up, and that happens every single night. As a result of that, a report is generated. So we don't touch your data. We don't touch your data without a report being generated so that you know exactly what happens to your data. So as it runs through the API from your SIS through the API, a Trans 10 or Trans 15 report is generated. The Trans 15 report is a detailed report that is only available within a 3-day window because those reports can get very, very large. Each element of data creates what's called a GUID or a resource ID, and there are these 20, 30 digit alphanumeric digits that are created. So as you can imagine, those reports, if you've submitted all information for all of your students within your LEA, those can get quite large. So they're only available within 3-day increments. So if you have ever questions about what exactly your SIS is sending, the Trans 15 will be the report that you want to look at. Once the data has landed successfully, it generates a report, and those are the STUD 10 and STUD 15 and STUD 72 reports. Those are specific to student data. If you're looking at SPED for your special ed students or ELL for your English language learners, you'd want to look at the ELL 10 or SPED 10 to see those services or programs have landed within AzEDS. Then we go through that process which I was talking about called integrity. Integrity runs is a set of rules that are run against the data that has landed, determined by whatever is in statute or the individual business rules within the Department of Education. As a result of the integrity running, a report is generated. An intake 15 for your student data, an intake 35 for your instructional calendars that you are uploading from your SIS. The intake 15 can show you what has passed through integrity and what has failed through integrity. Most schools look at the failed integrity because we want to know which data did not land. As a result of integrity, your student data is then run through a process called ACE. ACE is an acronym within an acronym. It's ADM, so Average Daily Membership Calculation Engine. And so this runs through, similar to integrity, where the rules are established based on what is in statute or the business rules within each of the individual departments within ADE. And so those rules are determined, again, based off of the departments within ADE, such as school finance, OLS, the ESS department, any one of the programs such as Title I, Health and Nutrition, those accountability. So there's all these sets of rules that get run through. Just because a student has passed integrity, now ACE determines whether or not we're going to pay you for that student information that has landed. So again, this is just kind of the process, and this is kind of a zoom out from what happens in AzEDS to what happens in payments. And so it's actually in two different servers. So we have the AzEDS server where we're receiving all of the transactions for your student data, and integrity and ACE are running every single night. And that runs again every single night at 5 o'clock. It kicks off. You'll see it runs about an hour or two for each process. But we only receive or aggregate that information and push it over to the payment servers once a month. And as a result of that process, a report is generated. So every single time that somebody in ADE or a process in ADE touches your data, a report is generated. So understanding where to look at those reports is key. So again, pushing the payments only happens once a month. And then as a result, the 46-1, the SPED 28 or ELL 28 are generated on the public-facing portal as a summary report. And then once payments is done looking at that, and we'll look at this again a little bit deeper, the APOR, if you're a district, the APOR 55-1 is created, and the CHAR 55-1 is also created. So if we were drilled down backwards, again, this is only once a month, so there's my little data push guy, and then payments pushes that once a month. So I'll take a look at a calendar next, in the next few slides, so that we can kind of see how that process or that timeline kind of works out. So if we were to drill down backwards from like a business manager perspective or accountant perspective, the APOR 55 are typically the reports that they're looking at if you're a district again, or charter, the CHAR 55. If they were to drill down to find the actual detail of the student that's creating those numbers on those reports, you'd kind of have to drill down from the APOR to the 46 to the 20 to the intake 15, and then all the way to the STUD 10, and then ultimately all the way back to the little blue guy where you're submitting the student data. Again, that process for us pushing the payments information only happens once a month. So it's important for you to understand those data deadlines. And so we call those data capture deadlines. So on those days, you want to make sure that your student data for payment is exactly where it needs to be. So those are actually posted on the school finance homepage. On the right hand side, you'll see a red button. We have fiscal year 2019, and I think it's just been updated for fiscal year 2020. So those data capture deadlines are posted on the website. So let's look on a calendar so that we can kind of tie it all in together so that we can understand how those reports are generated and when they're generated. So we have the data capture date, and this is just an arbitrary calendar to show you. Typically the first data capture is the first Tuesday of the month. Data capture happens where we're taking a snapshot of the data that you've submitted in AzEDS on that Tuesday. Wednesday, the next day, an account analyst comes in, and we actually go through that process, the data push process, and summarize and generate those 46-1 reports and the 28 reports for your SPED and ELL. We've got about a week to analyze that data so that we can see that your ADM at the state is where it needs to be. The deputy associate reviews the ADM values and determines if there's something that's way off. Then at that point in that week, we'll have some time to reach out to the schools that have had a significant drop in ADM, so that hopefully we can try to work something out in that week. Once that week is over, so we'll just kind of go through that again. Once that week is over for the account analysts to analyze that data, at that point we're sending it over to the payments team. We say, hey guys, we're good. They then generate their APOR and CHAR reports. They have to have their information, their summarized and aggregated data over to the accounting office, the state accounting, 5 days before the end of the month so that you can get your payment on the 1st. So they have, it's a pretty tight schedule if you think about it, from the time in the beginning of the month where we're capturing your data to the next month where you're actually getting paid as a result of the data that has been in AzEDS. So things can get a little tight, so it's important to understand the data capture dates. So now we're going to dive into some of the reports that you should be looking at as far as ADM. If you are new, you should have an ADA Connect account, and the reports are going to be located under the AzEDS Portal. Before we go in directly into the reports tab, which is up on the left-hand side of the corner screen there, you want to always make sure that you're looking at the actual system status. The system status will show every single night when integrity or any of these integrity processes have kicked off. You want to make sure that the status always shows complete. And for the better part, they do. If ever, though, it says that the status is incomplete, you'll see that these buttons will become red. And it's important for you to understand that if a process didn't run, the reports that you're looking at may not show you the most valid data. So it's important that you make sure that you pause for a minute and see that the data did process completely. And again, it's rare. And you should, if you're signed up for the red flags from the AzEDS IT team, you'll get notices if something did not run. So once I go into the AzEDS report, on the left-hand side, you'll see these green buttons, and as you click on them, they'll expand. And each one of those areas, such as student detail and ADM, is what I have access to and what I'm going to actually look at. These are different roles that you have access to. So if you don't have access to the ADM reports that we're going to dive into, your entity administrator at your district will be able to help you get access to these reports. And I think that the role within ADE Connect is AzEDS Data Coordinator Basic Reports will give you the student detail reports, and then AzEDS Data Coordinator ADM Reports will give you access to these ADM reports that we're going to look over in these videos. So if you don't have access to that, find out who your entity administrator is at your school so that you can get access to this report. So the reports that are listed here are reports that I would use to reconcile student data and ADM. And understanding the process helps you understand which reports you should be looking at. If the student didn't land in AzEDS, they wouldn't show on the STED 10. If they did show on the STED 10 but are failing the integrity process, they would show on the intake 15. If they didn't pass integrity and are showing on the ADM 15, likely they're not going to show up on the ADM 15 and wouldn't show up on the ADM 20, which is a summary of the ADM 15 report. So it's important to understand which reports and how the process works so that we know exactly where to look for if a student is missing from ADM and not generating funding as you would expect. So let's take a look at some of those reports. So we have the ADM 15, which is a student detail level of the ADM that a student is generating. And this report is showing ADM that a student generates for regular ADM, SPED ADM, and ELL ADM. The best way to look at these reports is on the CSV version. So if you simply click on CSV, it'll dump it into an Excel. So at that point you can filter the Excels and set up as a table and do pivots and do all sorts of fancy stuff in Excel. If you're not comfortable with Excel, I highly recommend, at minimum, you learn how to set it up as a table, to use the filters, and how to sum at minimum. So we'll take a look at the ADM 15 and we'll take a look at exactly which columns, because it is a lot of information on the reports. So we'll take a look at exactly which columns we should be looking at. If you've come to this workshop Wednesday in person, and I've done this a couple of times, I hand these ADM 15 out, the ADM 20, and some of the reports that we'll be looking at, and we highlight exactly which fields I'm talking about so that you can identify location. So the next report is an ADM 20. The ADM 20 is simply a summary of the ADM 15, but it's a summary of the ADM that each grade offered at your school, how much ADM each grade is generating based off of the student detail. So the ADM 20 should reflect exactly the summary reports once a month if you're looking at the right data capture days. So it's important to understand which reports and the timing. So we'll talk about the summary reports. So the ADM 20, like I said, should exactly match the 46 report. The 46 report is something that ultimately feeds into the CHAR reports if you're a charter, and APOR if you're a district, for payment. These reports are summary reports that are available online. So if you go to azed.gov/finance, you'll see in the middle light blue bar reports. Scroll down, just hover over reports, scroll down, and you'll see district/charter student count reports. And those are summary reports. They don't have any student detail. Those are available online. They're public facing reports. Since you are receiving public money, we have to have those reports available online. And so once you click on that guy, it'll take you over to student count reports. At this point, you can select your district and hit go. So you'd have to select it from the drop down here, select your district, hit go, and it'll take you to the reports that are available this month. And so every single month that we go through the process of what's called data push, it generates one of these reports online. So if we go back to the calendar, you'll remember that for each time frame or each process that is run through, a report is generated. So the very first thing that happens after an account analyst says, hey, payments team, we're good to go. Well, data push happens and it generates these 46-1 reports and the 20s, the 28s. Then account analysts say, hey, payments team, we're good to go. And then they generate the APOR reports. So if you have the calendar in front of you for the timeline of when that happens, you'll see that it directly matches what's happening here on the public facing portal. These reports are saved every single month. They overwrite the previous month. I recommend saving these if you are a CFO or business manager, saving these every single month, because if you don't, you won't have access to the previous month. You can always reach out to the account analyst team so that we can send those to you. But best practice is for you to save them yourself, because these do get overwritten every single month online. So let's take a look at the reports and how we're getting to those numbers. So the APOR 55, if you remember back, let's go all the way back. The APOR 55 is kind of that final report to the last step of all of your data. So that's this guy up here. We're going to drill down from the APOR 55 and how we're getting those numbers. So bear with me. It's going to be, I'll show you exactly where we're getting those numbers from. And we're going to go through each one of the reports and highlight exactly what you should be looking at. So here we have the APOR 55, and I chose a large district because it kind of has a little bit of everything. So Mesa is going to be my example here. So the APOR 55 is in 6 pages. The first 3 pages look very, very similar, except if you're looking at the top left-hand side, you'll see non-AOI student counts. Non-AOI, AOI is Arizona Online Instruction. Those are your brick and mortar students. Those are your regular ed students that are coming in to your campus. If you do not have an online school, you would expect to see page 2 and 3 of your APOR 55 or CHAR 55-1 to show zeros all the way through. So non-AOI students, this student count is coming directly from the 46-1 down to the ADM 20 down to the ADM 15. So we're going to take this journey together on those numbers. So this student count report is showing for the brick and mortar students the 60110.692, which I got directly from the 46-1. So let's take a peek at that. So let's remember that 6110. We'll see the 6110.692 non-AOI, those are your brick and mortar students, and we're looking at the 100th day ADM. The school finance team is always going to pay you based off of the 100th day ADM. The 40th ADM does still reflect because for auditing purposes, you still have to show that you've reconciled against the 40th day values and the 100th day ADM values. So on here you see the 6110 that was for the non-AOI. The next page you see on the 46-1 where I've highlighted the total, and this one kind of goes a little bit backwards where it starts from non-AOI, AOI full-time, and then AOI part-time. You'll see that on your APOR 55-1, page 1, 2, and 3. The 46-1 does total, so 6218.600 is the total ADM that this school is receiving for its allocation for the year. So if you've come to the workshop Wednesday, we did this whole worksheet time, and so I was able to hand out the worksheets that I'm going over, and so you're able to highlight exactly the areas that I'm talking about. So we're going to try to go over this online. It's a little weird because I don't actually have an audience here to kind of go through it. So just kind of bear with me because it's a little bit different than actually presenting in person. So I handed out the ADM Reports Checklist. And in this, I'm going to go over the ADM 15, the ADM 20, the ADM 46-1, and the 55-1. We're going to look together over very, very specific elements in the report that you will need to be able to reconcile and understand where that data is feeding through and understand it's kind of like the data's life cycle and how we came to this number for payment. So bear with me, we'll figure it out together. So let's take a look at the ADM 15. The ADM 15 again is the student detail report that shows the ADM detail for all of your students. It contains not only regular ADM, but it also contains SPED ADM that a student generates for you and an ELL ADM value if those students have those services. We're only looking at regular ADM today. So here is an ADM 15 report, and it's got a ton of information. So it's important for you to understand what you should be looking at for reconciliation purposes for ADM. So the first thing that you want to make sure that you're looking at is the data capture date. If we're trying to reconcile based off of the summary report for the 46-1, we need to make sure that we're pulling up the right data capture date. Because remember I said that only happens once a month. Even though an ADM 15 is generated every single night, if we're reconciling to the 46-1 and some of the CHAR reports that we're looking at, we want to make sure that we're pulling up the right data capture date. So column D will show you on the ADM 15 which date you've pulled. The execution ID is a timestamp within AzEDS that you'll only see in AzEDS. So this particular execution ID, 6418, is what we're going to look at, and we're going to pull for the ADM 20. I've summed here in the ADM 15 the limited membership days for ADM. So what I've done is I have filtered regular ADM, summed this column, this 6218, which was the number that we looked at on the 46-1, 6218 for the total ADM value, and this is the number that's pushed, and that's column AE, limited membership days, divided by 100. We'll talk about this a little bit later. So 6218 is the number that we were looking for. When I said that I filter, if you're not familiar with Excel, filter is going to be your best friend when it comes to ADM. You want to click on this guy up here, sort and filter. So you would just highlight all the columns or format this entire spreadsheet as a table, sort and filter. And so I filter column B for ADM type, select regular within the filter, and then sum this. So if you're not familiar with sort and filter, that's going to be your best friend. I would definitely learn how to use that feature within Excel. Next thing I do is auto sum to sum this column for limited membership days. So you want to make sure that you are aware of that. Summing for ADM regular. And I also want to make sure that I'm filtering column X for fundable interval for fundable students, because ADM 15 also does show non-fundable students, such as your preschool that do not have SPED services. So it's important to make sure that you're only filtering and showing fundable students. Funding type regular, and then again limited membership days, and we're just going to sum that guy. So the 621859.858, divide that by 100 because it's 100 membership days that we are paying you on, equals the 6218.598, and so that number is the number that we're going to be looking for. So looks good. So the next slide just kind of illustrates how to filter and what you should be filtering for in case you didn't catch that. We definitely want to filter column B for ADM type. You'll see the filter come up where it shows ELL, regular, and SPED. We're simply going to uncheck those boxes so that we're showing regular only. And then we're also going to filter column X for fundable intervals. You'll see where it says a selection if you have fundable or non-fundable students. We want to unselect non-fundable so that we are only showing fundable students that have regular ADM. So here's an ADM 20. The ADM 20 is a summary report of the ADM 15. This report will show the report date, the date that you ran the report. The data capture date, again, you want to make sure that you're looking at the right data capture date to match the ADM 15, to match the 46, and then eventually match the CHAR reports. So we want to make sure that we're on the same page and we're looking at the same data set. You'll see the aggregation execution ID, the 6418 that we saw in the ADM 15. So if you're confused about the date, you can always make sure that the aggregation execution ID date matches what's on the ADM 15. The integrity execution ID date may show a different execution, but what we're looking for is the aggregation execution ID. So the ADM 20 is broken up into two pages. The 40th day, which should match what's on your 46-1. So you want to make sure that when you are looking at this report that you're looking at the second page, because we're paying you based off of a 100th day. So 40th day should match the 6235. If I were to look at the 46-1, I would see this value under the 40th day or period 1 column within the 46-1. We're not looking at that guy. So my little friend here, he's just kind of sleeping because he doesn't particularly look at the 40th day. So we have the second page of the ADM 20, and it has all of the same information. It has the report date, it has the data capture date that we're looking at, and it has the aggregation execution ID. And again, it was 6418 that we were matching to the ADM 15. And then on the second page, you'll see this is the projected 100th day. At the time that I pulled this, this particular LEA had not yet passed their 100th day, so the report will show projected 100th day ADM until they reach their actual 100th day. That value will change to actual 100th day ADM, and this is the value that is sent over to the 46-1. So we want to make sure that when we are pulling the ADM 20 that we're not only pulling up the right data capture date, but we're also looking at the projected 100th day for this reconciliation exercise. So the value, again, there we are, 6218.598, and if you remember, wrote down that number in the previous slides, this is the number that we're looking for. So very good, the ADM 15 matches, so 6218.598, there's that number again, and we got my little friend who's just ready to go. So here's the 46-1, which is the summary report that is generated just once a month. and you'll see those values on here. So we're going to talk about that. We want to make sure that obviously we're pulling the right district, charter district or regular district. Again, we're using MESA. We want to make sure that we're pulling up the right report date. So data capture for this specific month was the day before, which makes sense. The process happens the night before. The next day somebody comes in, hits the data push button, and then generates this report. So here we are for 12/6 for that day. It's broken up just like I promised, the 40th day, 100th day. The value that we're looking at is the total 100th day ADM. Again, this is broken up in non-AOI full-time, non-AOI students, AOI full-time students, AOI part-time students, and we'll take a look at where those numbers are actually landing in just a bit. There's a 6218, 6110 that we were looking at for the brick and mortar, so let's keep an eye on that. There's that 6218 that we were looking for again, and we'll see those numbers generate and eventually land on our APOR 55 if you're a district, CHAR 55-1 if you're a charter. These reports will look very similar if you're a charter, with the exception of like the last page or two. Districts have additional funding sources or different funding sources than charters do. But these first 3 pages should look exactly the same for a charter. So here's our APOR 55, and what we're looking for is to make sure that we're matching the district or your district. The run date, this date you would see it's not 12/6 because we had that week window. If we go back to the calendar where we're actually looking at the data process timeline, you'll see that this typically happens about a week or so later after the 46 is generated. The apportionment date is for the next month. So December's data capture, so we had the December 5 data capture, December 6 data push day, which is when the 46-1 report was generated, for January payment. So you'll see the apportionment date. So you have to make sure that we're looking at the right dates. Non-AOI student counts, non-AOI Arizona Online Instruction is simply brick and mortar students. There's that 6110 number that we're looking at for the brick and mortar students. Add-ons. So off to the left, so you'll see in the student counts where we received the 46-1, off to the left-hand side, bottom left-hand side, you'll see add-ons. And so these are where the APOR 55 or CHAR 55 will show the add-ons for your student counts for ELL students, K3, and special education students. And then each one of the weights that each student generates as a result of their need. And so this number, the 6110, was not the number that we were looking at in previous slides. So where did we get that number from? Again, this is just or brick and mortar students. So if we were to, again, pull up the ADM 20 report or even the 46-1, so 6110 is the number that we're looking for. If we were to pull that guy up, you'll see 6110 in non-AOI ADM, that it's not accounting for the AOI full-time or AOI part-time. So 6218 is that magic number that we were looking for, but we're only looking at the brick and mortar schools right now. Same situation, here's the APOR 55-1. This is for AOI full-time students that this school has. Student count report, the student count for the AOI full-time students shows 75.672. If we were to look at the ADM 20 for this guy, 75.672. Where are we getting that number from? 75.672 for AOI full-time. If I were to drill down from the ADM 20 and go backwards to the ADM 15, filter for just online students that have an FTE value of 1, I would see that the summed column for membership days would also sum to 75.6722. Next page, we've got the last page 3 on the APOR 55 AOI part-time student counts. We'll see that number 32.236. And where are we looking at that again? We're looking at the ADM 20, 32.235. There's a slight rounding issue on that guy, but it's the same. And then we've got our magic number, the 62218.584. There's my little friend just kind of knocking it out the ballpark. He thinks he's cool. So we've got that number again. The 6218.598 was the number that we were looking for on student counts. So this is page 4. And if you have specific questions on page 4 in regards to the payment that you're receiving, you're definitely going to want to reach out to the payments team. I'm just trying to help you walk through where these reports are, where the data lands on these reports for payment. If you have questions in regard to the detail of the student data, you definitely want to reach out to the school finance analyst team. If you have questions regarding the detail on the APOR 55 and some of the numbers that are on here, you definitely want to reach out to the payments team because they are your experts. So let's continue to kind of find this journey on where those numbers are coming from. So page 4 will show you the number that we were looking at for the student counts. But wait, you see here, we have the weighted student for non-AOI. That number has changed. We no longer see that 60 point whatever number that we were looking at before. The 6218 number. We're not seeing that anymore because we've already multiplied on page 4 of the APOR or CHAR 55 if you're a charter, the weights that your school should be receiving based off of what has been determined in statute. And so if you look here, we'll just take a peek at page 3 just for ease. The student counts weighted support level, this number here, the 1.50, 1.5, is determined by the size of your district and all sorts of other things determined in statute. So if you have questions regarding your support level weight and what your multiplier is, you definitely want to reach out to the payments team and they'll kind of walk you through where that is. And then you'll also see these weight counts. So by the time we get to page 4 of the APOR, you'll see, let me just get back over there. You'll see those weighted values have now been assigned here. So we have instead of the 60 that we had for the brick and mortar, now as a result of that multiplier, we're at 71,000 for the brick and mortar students, AOI full-time, AOI part-time. Weighted add-ons, these are the add-ons for the K3 ELL students and SPED students. So that was kind of these numbers here. Let's go back. It's kind of a lot. That's all of these values here, the weighted add-on count. So if I were to look at page 1 for this one, I would see those counts there on that. Base level amount, this number is determined what's in statute. So the legislators determine, or the governor determines the budget, and the base level, the legislators approve the base support level for the fiscal year. And this fiscal year it was 3,729.31 for a student. So that's where those numbers are hanging out. So we've got this base support level again for the brick and mortar students. Payments timeline. So we're just going to review quickly the payments timeline. So we've got the data capture date, and in this instance we were looking at December. The ADM 15 is generated as a result of data capture. Data capture was the first Tuesday of this month, which happened to be the 4th. The next day, somebody came in and hit the data push button, and as a result of that, oops, this was actually the 5th for whatever reason. Maybe December was a little weird. Data capture was on the 5th. Data push was on the 6th. As a result of data capture, the reports that we're looking at are December 5th, ADM 15, and ADM 20. If I were to look for the data push report that is generated, the report that I want to look at is the student count report, the 46-1, and that's the public facing one. The payments team, once I give them the go ahead and run their reports, the APOR 55-1 is generated, and we didn't talk about this guy, the APOR 64-1, and this is 5 days before the end, typically 5 days before the end of the next month, and this, because this had a holiday in December, was kind of a weird example to choose. The 64-1, APOR 64-1, or CHAR 64-1 will actually show you dollar values. So if you're interested in that, that's the way you want to look at for that report. So ADM, we'll talk about ADM one more time. Average daily membership and understanding the formula. It's simply membership days over 100 multiplied by the FTE. So in the ADM 15 report, when I summed the column for membership days and divided by 100, this was the formula that you used to find the ADM value that was showing on your 46-1. Super important to understand, head count doesn't equal ADM. because you have 1,000 students listed at your school on the rosters sitting in the classrooms doesn't mean that the ADM will necessarily equal 1,000. Why is that? It could be because a student came in later within your 100 calendar instructional days or left. And so ADM is average daily membership. So it doesn't necessarily indicate students that are sitting in your classrooms. Average daily membership is the calculated value for each of those fundable intervals. So 40th and 60 days, period 1 or period 2, or 100 days. In school finance, we like to say kind of the same thing a few times. So I try to make sure that I'm saying all the different ways that we say the same thing so that if you ever hear it, you're not confused, because it is a lot of information. Most schools are in session 180 days. So schools define their own calendar and they're not always in session the same days. So how do we represent the first 100 days for membership for a student if the student has come and gone to other schools within Arizona? So we're going to talk about that coming up in the next few slides. But before we do, we'll talk about instructional calendar because that does impact ADM just as integrity does. And I didn't mention that in the previous slides because instructional calendar is fairly new, but it does also have an impact on the ADM that a student can generate. So let's take a look at the instructional calendar. So every district is required to establish their own instructional calendar for the year. And as a result of the instructional calendar that gets submitted, it runs through integrity processes, similar to the way that student data is run. For student data, the intake 15 will show you passed or failed integrity errors, and the intake 35 will show you errors specific to the instructional calendar that you've submitted from your SIS. So here's a peek at what a calendar looks like in the AzEDS world that you've submitted from your SIS. So let's take a look at ADM and FTE. We're going to take a look at this 12th grader here. So Monica, which is myself, I'm a 12th grader and I'm only taking 2 classes because I've excelled and I decided I want to get a part-time job, so I'm taking these 2 classes. So I'm taking Social Studies and English 4. Saba has a different path. She doesn't need a full-time job, but she wants to do other things, or she failed previous classes, or maybe her junior and sophomore year, and now she's making up for it. She's got a different path than me as a 12th grader, and this often occurs. Saba is taking a full load. She's taking AP Physics, English 4, Social Studies, so she's taking 6 classes all the way through. So her FTE versus my FTE is going to look very different. I'm taking 246 hours for this year, so my FTE, or full-time enrollment, is going to be 0.25. I'm enrolled for the whole 100 days of membership, so 100 times 0.25. I'm going to generate 0.2. I'm going to generate 25 membership days towards ADM. Saba did 1,000 plus hours for her school year, so she is a full-time FTE. No question about that. She's in school for the full 100 days of membership, so 100 times 1 equals 100 membership days. So for your school, she's going to generate 1 ADM. Should there not be any other limiting to consider. So limiting overview. So if Saba so happens to attend an online course in the summer in July, online classes don't have instructional calendars. Their start date is June 1 all the way to July 30. So where you have 180 days, this online instruction schools don't have calendars. So let's say that Saba in this case, though she had 1,000 hours at your school district, she also took the online classes during the year. She took 450 hours for online in the fall. So technically, she would have generated a total of 1.75 ADM value for the 3 memberships that she had at your school, the AOI. She should be capped, though, at 1.0. The state caps ADM at 1.0 ADM unless the student is enrolled in a CTED satellite course, 1.25, or a central satellite course. They can generate up to 1.75 ADM. That's not this instance. So in this instance, Saba is being limited to 1.0 ADM. So in July, she generated for the AOI 25 membership days. So we took the time that she submitted and we smushed them into the face of membership days. So we took 100 divided by 175 and found this limiting factor. And so this is the limiting factor for SUBA. This is what we're going to use to determine how we evenly split the pie for this student so that everybody gets their fair share of the 1.0. So in this case, we take the membership days that she generated times the limiting factor of 0.75, and then that's how we determine the limited membership days. So this can be a little confusing, so we're going to go through this again together, finding another example. So if you came to my workshop Wednesday, I had lots of worksheets, and we kind of worked through this together. So we had instructional calendar, so I have screenshots of the calendars that we're going to go through. So limiting exercise. So we have the calendars that we're going to go through and the actual worksheet that I handed out online. So you'll have an opportunity to see that as well. So in this case, we have this student. We're not using Zaba or Monica anymore. We're using Mario. He's a 12th grader. He started at Chandler High School on their first instructional day of school. In the summertime, Mario's parents bought a home in Mesa. Mom or dad got a promotion, they got a job, they're moving all the way to Mesa from Chandler, so I guess it's not that big of a deal. They bought a home in Mesa. They decided to enroll him in a Mesa high school instead of the Chandler high school. Thanks, Mom and Dad. They withdraw him from the Chandler school August 7th. He was able to start Mesa High on their first instructional day. He's then enrolled the rest of his senior year at Mesa High School. Hopefully not to scar the fact that mom moved him his senior year, mom or dad. And it was able to enroll all his high school senior year at Mesa High School and then was able to graduate at the end of the year. So good for you, Mario. So let's take a look at Chandler's calendar. I had said that he started the beginning of their calendar year. So their declared begin date was 7/23. So here we have 7/23, and he withdrew. He withdraws from Chandler High School August 7th. So let's take a look at Chandler's August 7th. Yikes. So he started on the 23rd of July and was able to go all the way to August 7th. So he did generate some membership days with Chandler. So let's take a look. 7/23 was the day that he started, and we're just going to count the days that he attended. So August 7th was the day that I told you that he withdrew. So there we are counting. Then I said he was able to start Mesa and was able to start the very first day of Mesa's first day of school, which would make sense. He withdrew on August 7th from Chandler. Mesa High School had not yet even started. So they started August 8th, was their first day of school. So Mario didn't have a break. He just had that extra week of instruction. So let's take a look at how that works out. So how many membership days does a student generate for his first school? And in this case, it would be Chandler. So let's take a look at that. So 12 days. 12 days is what we counted on that calendar. So we can go back and take a look at that again. So we're counting from July 23rd to August 7th. So let's kind of count those 12 days. Boop. There's me counting my 12 days. Very good. All the way to August 7th, he was able to generate 12 days of membership. There's Mesa. He was able to generate since the beginning of his calendar, with Mesa's calendar not being interrupted at all. So first, how many membership days did he generate for his first school? The answer is 12. How many membership days does he generate at his second school at Mesa High? Their calendar hadn't even started until August 8th. So he was able to generate 100 days. So if we were to count 100 plus the 12, how many fundable membership days does a student generate? 112. So total fundable membership days are 112. But remember, we only pay you based off the first fundable 100 days. So what are we going to do? We're going to find what is called the limiting factor. So the limiting factor is simply 100 days divided by the total fundable membership days that he generated. So 100 divided by 112 equals 0.8928. And that, my friend, is your limiting factor. So we're going to plug that in there. So to determine the ADM that this student generates for each one of these schools, so that we're divvying it up evenly. So 0.8928 is the number that we're going to use for both. So we're going to plug that in for Chandler, the green box, plug that in for Mesa, the bluish box. He generated 12 fundable membership days for Chandler. That equals 10.71. Limiting factor multiplied by the 100 days for Mesa High. So that would be the ADM that this student generates. So if you were to add 10.71 plus 89.29, you'd see that that's 1.0. Hopefully that helped you understand limited ADM. So where can you see limited ADM? On the limited ADM 25 report. If you have questions regarding the limited ADM 25, you can always reach out to the account analyst. The account analyst team, this report will show you the intervals that a student is being limited for. So in this case where you don't understand, if you're working at, let's say, Mesa, for example, like, hey, wait a minute, this kid started at the beginning of the year with us. Why are we being limited? Why are we only receiving the 89.29 in this case? Because you don't know that that student had that other membership, the 10.71 here at Chandler. You would expect to see them on the limited 25 report. And that is all I have. I hope that I was able to help you understand limiting and ADM and where everything is. If you have questions, you can always reach out to us at sfanalystteam@az.gov. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Again, sfanalystteam@az.gov will be able to get your question answered.